In this video, we'll learn about layer and mix nodes. So open up this shader network that is assigned to the shader ball. In the shader list, search for layer. We have two layer nodes, layer shader and layer RGBA. Add a layer shader node to the work area. The layer shader is used to mix and stack up to 8 shaders or materials, so surface inputs. But the layer RGBA node is used to mix and stack up textures and images and gradients, so RGBA inputs. Let's start with the layer shader node. Add a standard surface shader node and connect its output to the layer 1 input of the layer shader node. And now this standard surface shader is showing up in the render. Now let's add another standard surface shader. Set its base weight and metalness to 1. And we can use the gold preset for now. And now let's say we want to have this gold shader on top of our basic white standard surface shader. So connect this gold shader to layer 2 input of the layer shader. Now the gold shader conceals the white shader, and that is because the mix value of the layer is set to 1. If we start decreasing it, we start to get our white shader back. But normally we use a black and white grunge map to control the mix amount. So add an image node and load this BW28 texture. First, set it as the beauty shader. It looks cool. Now, if we connect this map to the layer 2 mix input, where the texture is white, we get the gold shader, and where it's black, we will get the white shader. So connect the map to layer 2 mix input and set the layer shader as the beauty shader again. And there you have it. Right now we only have 2 shaders, but we can add up to 8 shaders. It could be standard surface shader, toon shader, car paint, Lambert, hair, and so on. Next, we have layer RGBA node that, as I mentioned, is used to mix and stack up textures and images and gradients, so RGBA inputs, not surface inputs like standard surface shader. So add a layer RGBA node to the work area. And let's say we want to mix the texture that we just loaded with a noise node. So let's set the layer RGBA node as the beauty shader for now and connect that BW28 as the layer 1 input. Now add a C4D noise and set it as the beauty shader. Change the noise type to maybe something weird like SEMA. Global scale to 50%. Now set the layer RGB as the beauty shader again and set the C4D noise as the layer 2 input. Now it didn't show up in the render because the operation or blending mode is set to over. Let's change it to override, and now it covers the first layer. Let's set it to something like plus or multiply, maybe divide. Let's use plus for now. And we control the overall contribution of this layer with the mix value, which in turn can be controlled with another black and white texture. So we can layer up to 8 RGBA inputs like this. Let's set our main layer shader as the beauty shader and set this layer RGBA as the layer 2 mix input of the layer shader node. And there you have it. So that's about layer shader and layer RGBA nodes. Now, if I search for mix in the shader list, we have a mix shader and a mix RGBA. Mix shader is like layer shader, but it allows only 2 inputs instead of 8, and mix RGBA is like the layer RGBA node, but it allows only for 2 inputs instead of 8. So add a mix shader just above the layer shader and set it as the beauty shader. The mix shader is used to blend or add 2 shaders. So add the basic white shader as the first input and the gold shader as the second input. And this mix amount allows you to control the amount of blending between shaders. So at 0, we only get the first shader, and at 1, we only get the second shader, and at 0.5, we get 50% of each. And we can control this with a black and white texture as well. So let's use the layer RGBA node as the mix amount. And we get the exact same results, but we are limited to only 2 shaders here. This mix mode controls the mode by which the shaders are layered, either blend or add. By default, it's set to blend, which gives you a final shader that is physically correct and energy conserving. The add mode can break energy conservation if not used carefully. It is normally intended for adding 2 volume shaders or 2 shaders that only emit light, while adding 2 surface shaders like standard surface shader is not physically correct using the additive mode. For example, if you want to connect both fog and atmosphere volume to your environment, you can simply mix them using a mix shader in the additive mode and use the resulting mix shader as your environment shader. And finally, we have this mix RGBA node, so add it to the work area above the layer RGBA node and set it as the beauty shader. And here you can mix 2 RGBA inputs. So let's add the BW28 image as the first input and C4D noise as the second input. And now using this mix value, we can mix between the 2 inputs or control the mix amount with another black and white texture. For example, let's add a checkerboard texture, set its frequency to 5. And use it as the texture input, or as the mix input, sorry. So where the texture is black, the first input will show up, and where it's white, the second input becomes visible. And now we can use this mix RGBA as the mix amount for the mix shader. Set the mix shader as the beauty shader. And here is the result. So in this video, we'll learn about layer and mix nodes in Arnold for Cinema 4D. See you in the next video.